All right, is it okay? It's working. All right. Hey everyone. So my name is Hannah Boulanger. Today we're going to talk about the power of social media intelligence. We'll discuss different ways you can collect information and tools you can use, as well as how this information can be exploited and used to analyze different trends, and ultimately how you can keep yourself and your company safe. So a little bit about me. I said Hannah Boulanger. I'm a cyber threat intelligence researcher with Equinix, with a fantastic team of the Equinix Threat Analysis Center. Prior to joining ETAC or Equinix, I was an active duty Air Force officer. Spent about 4 years doing that, and now I've served as a reservist for about a year. So a lot of you may be familiar with a lot of these modern social media websites. They've got the meta group like Instagram, Facebook Messenger, Facebook, WhatsApp, Snapchat, dating apps like Tinder or Hinge, which people don't often think about those as social media, but they are considered that. So these are apps that billions of individuals use every single day. We also have ones that we'll categorize more as foreign apps. So like Telegram and vContact are going to be associated more with Eastern European users or Russian-based users. We also have Chinese sites like TikTok, Weibo or Weixin, which are typically out of China, and then underground forums, so using apps like Signal and Parler, which are great for end-to-end encryption. So we're going to, oh, is that me or? Thanks. So we're going to consider this our area of operations. And we're going to talk a little bit now about where you can go to, or these are areas you can go to collect information. So here's what we can gather from social media sites. So over on the personal side, you can gather information like your full names, your employers, your colleagues, friends, family, any kind of information, again, that you're putting out there, as well as in some cases, your politics. We also have the digital attributes. These are going to be things like your username, your email addresses, phone numbers, image metadata, so information that's actually stored within photos. It can reveal information like the device that was taken from, like an Android or an Apple device. And then also when you upload information online, it can say what kind of operating system it may have come from. So moving on to some tools that you can use to gather this information. These are going to be the free and open source that we'll start with. There's a website called whatsmyname.app, where if you're using the same username or same email address for everything, you are a great target for anyone that wants to find out what kind of apps you use. So you go in, you put a username in here, and it'll show up with any website that might be associated with. So now you're able to build kind of like a dossier on someone and figure out what kind of sites they go on, what they're interested in. This can be used for social engineering, which we'll get into a little bit later. A website called Epios, where you can go and search email addresses, phone numbers. This will pull information that was leaked from like data breaches. And again, you can go find sites that people use. One of the big ones is when you pull up email, if you use Gmail, it'll show what kind of reviews you've done, or it'll show a link for that, which can also be used for gathering information. We've got Migrate, which is a bit more of a technical site to use, but this is another one where you can gather information about usernames, emails, and ultimately create a dossier on individuals. Google Lens, you can do reverse image searching. So if someone has an image, say on Facebook, you plug that in there, and it might show if they use the same one on GitHub or Instagram, when I've used to identify other sources. We have I Been Pwned, which is kind of similar to Epios, but it'll show information, again, that's been revealed in data breaches. You can then look at what the breach was, research that, and see what kind of information was actually published. So it could have been information like your address, more phone numbers, full names, date of birth, etc. And finally, one that a lot of people don't really think of as a tool, but Wayback Machine is used to, like they say, like the internet never forgets, right? So there are different sites that go and index and sites that crawl, collect information. They basically get cache and index where you can go search it on Wayback Machine. You can also use that to get beyond paywalls. So if you're trying to look at a site that requires you to pay, like the New York Times, then you can go put the site in there and see what you can find. All right, there are also commercially available tools. Sometimes these are called tips or threat intel platforms. Some popular ones, Recorded Future, they're actually a sponsor here. Today, we have Flashpoint, Fivecast, Social Links, Talkwalker, Data Miner. These specialize in data scraping or using some sort of proprietary software to collect information from social media sites and make it accessible to anyone who has an account. Are you guys familiar with Cambridge Analytica? Big scandal back in 2016. Basically, they scraped information from people's social media profiles by the billions. They were able to provide analytical assistance for political campaigns like the 2016 presidential election of Donald Trump and the 2016 Brexit referendum. So both of these were successful campaigns, right? So as many people thinking that these are such powerful tools that can ultimately change the way that people think. So I have the image of Inception up here because these campaigns and organizations can use that information and insert advertisements or information to ultimately influence the way that you're thinking. And oftentimes we're completely unaware of it. Right. I'm going to go into the life cycle of social media intelligence. It's actually created by one of my coworkers, Will Thomas, which if you guys are looking for any information on it, getting into CTI, he has a GitHub and Twitter Bushido token, absolutely fantastic resource. But ultimately, we're going to start off in the target acquisition. So it's going for the what, who or what we're trying to learn more about. And then once you are able to establish that, go into the collection where where do you want to go for that information? That's where these social media sites really come into play. Once you have the information, you'll process it. Ideally, you want to make it queryable and scalable, and then you'll analyze the information. So you'll run statistical analysis, create a report, and then disseminate that to whoever your end user is. Hopefully get that feedback and start the process over again. So we're going to get into some case studies now. And I want to preface this with the goal of this talk is not to try to scare people away from using social media. It's just to try to give you an idea of what kind of information is actually out there. No one actually reads the terms and conditions, right? We just sign away. And we sign away a lot of our information. So we're going to start off with this heat map from Strava. So Strava is a popular social media app that's used to track people's workouts. This heat map is actually from a few months back, and it shows the user activity for anyone that had logged in. This is great for city planners. They're able to see where people are actually, walking around and working out, so it can help with planning routes and whatnot. But what if you don't want to reveal where you're at? A lot of people aren't aware of the fact that this information goes into a heat map in this database. And again, it seems relatively benign, but the case back in 2018 was researchers started looking at some of the areas that these heat maps were at and noticed, like, weird, some of these are out in the middle of nowhere. What is going on? And it turns out that individuals at military bases and covert sites, like black ops sites, were using their Fitbit, their Garmin watch, Apple Watch, and loading this information into Strava, which is ultimately revealing the perimeter of some of these locations. So it's great until you're walking around the perimeter of a base that's suspected of having nuclear weapons, or you're out in Yemen or Djibouti at a black site, or off in Niger, in the middle of nowhere again. But thankfully the Pentagon has their stuff pretty locked down. They don't allow you to have certain devices when you go in there. So you can't track as much where they're going. But key takeaway from this, though, is just that these apps can collect a lot of information, and more than people actually think. I use Strava all the time, but just go back in and look at some of your settings. There's actually a report that came out about a week ago about how even if you have your profile set to private, some of that information can still end up going on to this data heat map, and people can ultimately find out where you live. There are settings where you can make it so that it doesn't collect the data within about a quarter mile or half mile of your home, but I'll just go through some of those. All right, we talk about how you can use social media intelligence to exploit publicly available information. So as it sounds, this is information that is available to the public. It can be things like property records, voter registration in some areas, business filings, or the case we're going to talk about today is with FlightAware. So this individual, Jack Sweeney, is a programmer. He decided to analyze all this information, which these are just aircraft that are taking off anywhere in the world. It's used to track where they're at. So with the exception of some military aircraft, pretty much everyone's expected to file a flight plan as well as have ADSB, or automatic dependent surveillance broadcast system on. And I'll any point in time so that you can see where they're located. So Jack Sweeney took this information, again, all publicly available, and decided to start tracking Elon Musk and where his jet was. So he created an algorithm that anytime Elon Musk's jet takes off, it'll track him. So if he's leaving Austin or coming back from Austin and whatnot, it will show where he is. Elon wasn't very happy about this. Ultimately, he was like, hey, I could become a target. What are you doing? So Jack Sweeney said, you could give me a job. Elon Musk ultimately denied, and he still runs this site. But he didn't stop there. He also decided to go after Russian oligarchs and track their yachts. However, that's a bit more of a manual process. Right. We're talking now about how you can exploit sensitive data left in images. So a few years back, Tony Abbott, the former Australian Prime Minister, had published or posted a picture on his Instagram of his boarding pass. So someone noticed, hey, he left his reference number up here. So this hacker, Alex Hope, was egged on and said, hey, let's see what information you can find out about Tony Abbott based off of this. So he logs into the Qantas website, searches his name and his reference number, able to pull up with some information. Doesn't stop there, decides to go and inspect the page and see what kind of information may be revealed. Ultimately, reviewing some of the texts and seeing that there's passport number, business information, and a few other things. Right. I mentioned before about how photos have metadata, can include location settings, what kind of device it's taken from. We're going to talk about the case from John McAfee, jack of all trades. Guy was a NASA engineer, presidential candidate at one point, created the world's first antivirus software. Yes, he is that McAfee. Well, he had neighborly disputes with Greg Fowle, but ultimately, Greg Fowle was found dead from a gunshot wound, and John McAfee was the prime suspect due to everything that was going on. So John McAfee flees. He's out in Belize at the time, and Vice Society, I don't know if you're familiar with the news station, some of the reporters were able to catch up with him and said, hey, we found him, but we're not going to tell you where he's at. We're going to upload this photo. Well, no one thought to strip the metadata from this photo. So they're able to reveal everything about it. And again, ultimately the location. So the location, it's not on there, but we'll point out to be where the little dot is in Guatemala. So he's hiding out at this nice house right near the water. McAfee did come out at some point and said, hey, I actually manipulated the data. I totally wasn't there, which is very believable, right? But not the kind of information you want out if you're a fugitive on the run, wanted for murder. So ultimately, just be careful the kind of photos that you are posting. A lot of sites are good about scraping the metadata before it gets published. But other times, like people don't think, if you send, I'm an iPhone user, so you can see the map of where your photos are taken. Well, if I send a picture with all the metadata to you, you save that to your phone, and then it will now pop up on your map. So if you're just meeting someone and you don't want them to know where you live, if you don't take a picture of your cat and send it off to them. All right, so social media intelligence can also be used to target your employer. We're going to talk about Marcy, or Marcela Flores. Marcy has a ton of friends on social media. A lot of these guys also happen to be like notably defense contractors, all geographically dispersed from her location, which is showing in Liverpool. Marcy spent months, almost a year in some cases, building a rapport with some of these individuals who are associated with, again, defense contracts. But Marcy is not all that she appears to be. Marcy is actually a group of Iranian hackers known as TA456 that are used to basically conduct espionage and do spear phishing. So once Marcy was able to target these individuals, again, build that rapport, she got them to trust them enough to open up a diet survey. They click on the link, uploads an Excel file that then downloads malware onto their systems. So it's assessed that these individuals were likely targeted from information that they had online, such as like LinkedIn, showing what companies they were working for. Some of these cases as well, they had logged on to Facebook on their company computers. So their company computers were infected with this malware, and they were able to conduct espionage. Another similar case where people may end up reaching out online saying, hey, I have a job for you, click on this link, give me your resume, or hey, upload this PDF, hopefully you're on your work computer too. and ultimately get you to click on like spear phishing links to download malware. There's a great podcast on Darknet Diaries that talks about something similar, where these threat actors were able to use social engineering to ultimately target this gal. She goes by Lisa in the podcast, but she innocently posted information about what some of her likes were, and these threat actors used that to build rapport. And after about 9 months to a year, we're able to get her to give them like sensitive company information, which seems silly, right? You're like, oh, I would never do that, but it's a lot easier than you think. So in some cases, though, there are a lot of mistakes that can be made from social media. So in the January 6th Capitol riots, a lot of these individuals were unmasked, right? Faces fully on display. So the FBI and volunteer forces ended up banding together, trying to identify some of these individuals. Well, and they're thinking, oh man, like, we got some of these guys. We're gonna take them to justice. But sometimes you're wrong, right? In the case where this retired firefighter who was blamed for being there, was nowhere near there at the time, ended up basically being ostracized by his friends and his family, and he was hundreds of miles away at the time. So people think that they can do a lot of the social media intel gathering and this like doxing and whatnot, but there are definitely rules and guidelines that need to be followed so that you're not accidentally accusing someone of something that they weren't a part of. And talk about a little bit more now about doxing. So threat actors or trolls will engage in various activities and go after people that they don't like. It's really one thing that's really popular within the gaming and live streaming community is a thing called swatting, where they'll interrupt live streams by having the police or like SWAT teams go into these people's homes saying, hey, like this person has a hostage, and next thing you know, you've got the police after you. Especially if they're able to figure out where you live, again, based off of information that you may be putting out on social media. This was the case with a popular streamer named Kettles. She was targeted by a considered a violent extremist group called Kiwi Farms. So they figured out where she lived, had police go to her house. She was scared, which is a very natural reaction. So she ended up going into a hotel, stayed over there, said, hey guys, I'm fine, posted a picture of her cat on the bed at the hotel. This group was able to take the pattern from the sheets and cross-reference it with all of the hotels in the area until they ultimately found the one that she was at, and were continuing to threaten her. Go and talk about biometrics. So something that you can't change are your biometric features. You can't change, like an iris scan, can't change your fingerprints, right? I mean, unless you burn them off. But ultimately, what you're born with, you have forever. People, especially as technology improves, end up submitting high resolution photos online, which can be scanned, which may not seem like a big deal, but you're able to provide enough fidelity in some cases to provide, again, with this biometric info. Got a graphic that just shows studied with social media sites and corporate sites on what kind of information they gather. I'm going to take a picture real quick. But one of the best examples of this was a drug dealer that was actually arrested because he posted a picture of some cheese that he had purchased at Marks and Spencer's out in the United Kingdom. This was a photo that the police had of him showing these drugs. Well, the police were able to take this photo, ultimately to saturate it, invert it, increase the brightness and the contrast, sharpen it, and then do a trace bitmap where they're able to collect data points to identify his fingerprint. So they took this information, and then because they had this picture showing that, they were able to identify that it was this individual, which, again, something you don't really think of, right? Like people post pictures all the time of them holding something. But if you're a part of any sort of illicit drug trade, I recommend not doing that. Or just also don't be a part of illicit drug trades. All right, but this all goes to show that it's not all bad. Posting information and having information on social media can actually help find missing persons. So one of my coworkers, Will Thomas, I mentioned before, is a part of this group, the National Child Protection Task Force, where groups like them, web sleuths and crime watchers, end up contributing to these like search parties where they're able to use open source information to help find individuals that have gone missing, either just they wanted to go away and then they're finally found, or worse kind of scenarios. Also in the bottom left, we have an image of Trace Labs, which they do a global search party. OSINT, CTF, so capture the flag, where you can help contribute to finding people and ultimately bring them back home to their loved ones. So just a recap of everything we talked about. Social media intelligence can be used to exploit those location settings, as well as publicly available information, any sort of sensitive data that's left within images. It can be used to target your employers, or in some cases, it can be used to target your friends, but it can also be used to support law enforcement in bringing back missing people. Some social media best practices are, and just trying to keep your accounts private. If you're not going to have them private, just again, watch what kind of information you're actually posting. So on Twitter, you can go protect your tweets, but unlike Strava was the one where even if you're private, again, information can still get out there. So go on and say that you don't want to contribute to those heat maps. But so best practices are you can ultimately learn from other people's mistakes. As I mentioned already, set your profiles to private, only friend people that you know, check your location settings. Popular one is with Snapchat. So you can have your image or your location sent off to any of your friends, which are people I had friends with. I was like, I've only met you once and I can see where you are. And then you can create, tell what their habits are, like where they work, where they live based off of where people are going all the time. Apple also has a feature for showing like your most visited locations. It's crazy to think that our phones are tracking where we're going, but they do. That's how I found out that I went to Costco way too much. It was my #1 location for a while. And it also, we didn't touch on it before, but check your app permissions. You start seeing that certain apps want access to things that don't make sense. Like some things don't need access to your photos or your microphone, camera, et cetera. Make sure you go in and turn those off. But I really implore you to look yourself up online, see what kind of information you can find, and just be wary of what you're posting. One thing too, a lot of people don't think about is they post pictures of their kids going back to school, and it's gonna be happening in a few months. I'm like, oh, I can't wait for Sally to go hang out in Miss Smith's first grade classroom at XYZ elementary school. Oh, now you've just revealed where your kids are going to school. So cool. All right, that's all I've got. Do you guys have any questions?
You mentioned a lot about like Facebook and stuff like that, but you also, and privacy settings, but you didn't have a slide about Teen Who is fastest growing one that's out there now that actually has a lot of concern about it because the government is saying that like the China government is like watching this through TikTok. But I don't know, like I've heard both sides of the story and I haven't figured out which side is telling the truth just yet. But considering the fact that my family does use TikTok like it's a drug, I kind of want to make sure that they're protected. But I don't know much about TikTok. I don't have it. I'm too old to actually care about TikTok.
So I may be slightly biased. I don't have TikTok either. I would encourage everyone to delete TikTok. It's basically a giant information gathering system. So if you were to go into some of the terms and conditions, it'll reveal that it's a bit of a keylogger. So like any kind of information that you actually type on your phone in general can be released to the app, and they have access to all of your information.
And the Chinese app is partially owned by the Chinese government, correct? So that's how the infrastructure works over there, right?
Yeah. So it's recently been banned by a lot of like governments. Those state governments are starting to ban it and whatnot. So
okay, that's
yeah.
good to know. I have to call my sister.
Yeah, just go on Instagram like the rest of us, see it a week or two later. So
I'm fine with that. I'm on Instagram. I'll look at that stuff on Instagram.
Yeah.
But it's concerning because like it's already so much into our social life now. It's everywhere. Everybody has one except me. But and you apparently because you don't want to.